Now, WordPress is a fantastic tool, but it can be a bit touchy when you want to do stuff such as server-based PHP programming, for example, which is a shame because sometimes you want to go that extra step. So we're going to come up with an alternative using Microsoft Excel to do all the heavy lifting and generate files which WordPress is happy with. Our basic premise is that while there are millions of people familiar with Excel, there are not so many who relish tackling PHP or MySQL. So firstly, let's set up an Excel workbook and a worksheet called Sheet 1. And we'll add a little bit of data. And as you can see, we've got a small table of 5 people with 3 lots of data, the first and the last names and the town they live in. Admittedly, not very inspiring, but as we're going to be studying the basic principles, simple is probably best. And we're going to use a small Excel Visual Basic routine to put some life into the data, and we'll keep the coding as simple as possible. So we need to pull up Excel's Visual Basic editor, which we'll find in the Tools menu in older versions of Excel, or in the Developer tab in later versions. With the editor installed, right-click on the top left project window and choose Insert Module. And this is where we're going to write our bit of code. By the way, if you get confused by words such as macros, subroutines, functions, or procedures, don't worry, for our purposes they're practically the same. They're chunks of code with a name at the top. And the first thing to do is to write our subroutine name. Call it what you like, but it's generally a good idea to relate the name to what the routine will do. We've called ours PHP text files. Then we need some variables which we declare at the top of the routine. Variables are like boxes which we're going to put our worksheet data in. We're then going to use these variables to create some text, which will then get Excel to file away in a folder called phpFolder, which we've already set up on our desktop. Our variables come in 2 types: integer variables which contain whole numbers, and string variables which contain strings of characters such as names, comments, text, etc. Our integer variable n we'll see being used in a minute. And the string variables will pick up our worksheet data, be used to make file names, and the files we're going to output. Okay, now for the real coding. As you can see, there's not a great deal. Firstly, we'll make sure we're on the right worksheet by selecting Sheet 1. Then we'll set up a loop to go around picking up each row of data. Now, the for next loop is one of the oldest loops in programming. It simply goes round the code between the head of the loop and next at the bottom the number of times specified. In this case, it will loop 5 times. A very important point is that on each pass, our integer variable n will be increased by 1. That's from 1 to 2 to 3 and so on, which means we can use n as an index to take us from row to row in our little table. Now we pick up some data. Each variable is going to collect a copy of the value in the cells on the other side of the equal sign. The cells property has 2 indexes, the row number on the left and the column number on the right. The very first cell, for instance, is cell row 6 plus 1, that's 7, column 2. As you can see, we're using our integer n in the row index to increase its value each time round. Now we need to create a distinct file name for each set of data. Again, we can choose any name, but here we'll join the first and the last names together with an underscore. Now notice how this is done. The first name string variable is followed by an ampersand, which acts to join 2 strings together. This joins up with the underscore character, which must be contained within quotation marks. Keep your eyes on this. If you're going to make an error, it'll probably be here. Another ampersand joins the last name to form the full file name. Well, now we need a file path. Now, Excel is going to bypass the usual Windows file system, so we need to be accurate. We're going to create a string with the full file path to our desktop folder, phpFolder, and include the file name we've just created. Next, we create the output text we're going to put into our new file. As you can see, it's not very exciting, but at least you can see how a text string is formed by using string variables, text within quotation marks, and the ampersand string connectors. If by this time you're feeling this is a lot of effort for not much return, bear in mind that instead of 3 lots of data in each table row, we could have, say, 20, and instead of 5 people, we could have 500. But also text needn't be just spreadsheet data, but can also include HTML code with styling, links to images, videos, and web pages and more. Just to prove this point simply, we've added HTML bold tags around the person's name in the text. We'll see this later on. Okay, next we need to output the file. We open the file path we set up earlier and select a file number. That's a sort of channel number to keep data flows apart. Now we can write our own data to the file, and to tidy up we'll close the channel. Our first file has been saved and we're at the bottom of our loop, so we're ready to go around again picking up the next rows of data. Okay, if everything's in order, to get the routine to work, just click on the Run button at the top of the window. Nothing happened? Actually, it probably did. Probably in less than 1/10 of a second. Excel is very fast. When that's done, we've got 5 new files in our desktop folder. The next thing to do is upload, or FTP, the files to our web server. FTP, by the way, means File Transfer Protocol. We're using an FTP client called FileZilla. It's simple, fast and free, and one of the most popular downloads ever. Use the FTP access username and password sent to you by your web host to connect with your site server. And if you're using WordPress, then look for the WP content folder on your site. Open WP content, right-click, and then select Create Directory. Directory is about the same as Windows folders. And name it phpFolder just like our desktop folder, and then open that. Now upload the 5 text files into it. This is usually done by selecting files on your local site and dragging them across to your server directory. Now for putting all this on our WordPress page, but we do have a small problem. We need a little bit of PHP to load our files into the page, but WordPress doesn't like raw PHP. So we need to download and install a little plugin called Insert PHP, which will do the job for us. And once that's installed and activated, all we need to do is add a couple of lines in a WordPress page and use the text mode rather than the visual mode for this. Notice a couple of things on the lines we've written. We use the PHP term include to load in our file. We use apostrophes at each end of our file path, and we finish with a semicolon. Now PHP can be quite forgiving in some areas, but not with semicolons. Finally, view the page, and there are the contents of 2 of our small text files. Admittedly not the most exciting thing you've ever seen, perhaps a shade better than Hello World. But we have come a long way. We've used Visual Basic to strip down an Excel spreadsheet table into its components and convert them into files which we've uploaded to a web server, and using a tiny bit of PHP included the files on our WordPress page. And in the next video we'll build on this to make something much more impressive. In the meantime, thanks for watching.